So happy week before Thanksgiving. Woo! So appreciate we changed the date so we can all enjoy the comfort and the love of our families and friends on Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday, actually. Not that y'all all needed to know that, but I know. So I'm going to call to order the Nashville MTA Board meeting. And first on the agenda is our roll call. Jessica Dobbin.
Present.
Mary Griffin.
Here.
Janet Miller.
Present.
Walter Searcy. Present. We are all present. Thank you very much. Next, I have on the agenda the approval of the October 27th MTA Board minutes. There's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second. Janet Miller.
Any discussion, any additions, deletions? Hearing none, calling for the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have our minutes. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the public comment section. And remind everyone that you have 3 minutes for your comments. I have Mr. Knight, Darius Knight.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I have a public comment that I didn't write down today. I wasn't expecting I was going to have to do this. This afternoon on my way here from Route 23, there was a bus operator, bus 1830. This operator had an ambulance stop in front of him on 4th Avenue, blocking the entrance of Central for certain bus routes. The operator, of course, stopped. He let the customers out the back door and then, for whatever reason, decided that he was going to attempt to try to go around the ambulance, which he came very close to the light pole in front of Central and almost hit the ambulance. So as I yelled at him to stop, he finally stops and I had to stand in front of the bus to keep him from moving any further. No supervision was seen at all. Just a great bus operator who left his bus and actually helped that operator back his bus up so that he could get from behind the ambulance and get where he needed to be. So I want to say that I appreciate that bus operator for doing his job, which it was not his job to do. But I want to make clear that on last Friday, I had from last year sent in comments about the safety of Central and that Central needed something in terms of markings or railings to protect the pedestrians so that WeGo does not find itself in legal litigation just due to safety. Sometimes it's not always your operator, sometimes it's just a failure of a pedestrian not paying attention on their cell phone. So I wanted to make it clear, since in 2011, I visually watched a man be run over in front of Central on 4th Avenue. I do not want to see this happen again, and even since that time frame, there have been other accidents. So I'm asking you all for like the 6th or 7th time, please do something with Central. I have been hearing multiple things for months about something was going to be done and nothing has been done. So I wanted to kind of question some of the information that y'all have for route data. Route 75, it has really poor ridership. It says there's an issue with on-time performance. I'm just wanting to know, does that have to deal with the electric Proterra buses that's on that route? I also noticed that, of course, Route 79 is on there for route performance, of course, because of some issues within that route. But I also wanted to bring attention to Route 41 that has a really low ridership, and it is very close to Route 14. And I'm just thinking that maybe if you all kind of reconfigure that route into Route 14, just redoing the route altogether so that you don't have a route that, you know, is basically quote unquote an express route because it only runs certain times a day, but just giving access to those customers who utilize that UPS to actually get to and from work. The other issues, I'm going to hand this off to the lawyer and you all can go over them, but it's ranging from issues with Route 56, Route 23, 79, and the concerns of issues with your buses trying to safely get down Broadway, and for whatever reason, the party buses and those pedal taverns are pulling out in front of them. So it's not your operators creating the problem, but they're having to make really quick decisions that I feel they should not have to make. So I just want to ask if you all can press the city to do bus lanes going out on 4th Avenue and 5th Avenue so that they can get these buses in and out of the city within a proper manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Are there any other public comments? Any other public comments? Hearing none, this will close our public comments portion of our agenda. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the information-only items. We have 2 information-only items, the monthly financial report and the upcoming procurement projects list. Would any of our board members like to have any discussion about these items? Hearing no need for discussion, please make certain you take the opportunity to review those items. The consent agenda items, we only have 1 item, and that's the approval of the 2023 MTA Board meeting schedule. Hearing no objection, I will move for approval of the consent agenda item. I won't move, but I will ask one of you all to move for it.
Move to approve or accept.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there a second?
Second, Janet Miller.
Second, any other conversation regarding the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We have a new meeting schedule. Mr. Searcy. I am set for you to take over the Operations and Finance Committee.
Let's hear it. Let's have our monthly financial report as compared to budget, to the extent to which he cares to involve us.
Well,
Mr. Oliphant.
We're gonna do the, audit though, too, right?
You're gonna do the audit
Okay.
first? Please,
All right.
please crank it up.
Well, I will call Miss Erica Sager to the podium with Crossland. You have in front of you the audit report as well as the required communications that auditors have to give to the board. And basically, it's a clean opinion again. I will let her go into the details. There's some new nuances to it, but I will let her explain those. And if there's questions, we'll address them. Erica.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Again, my name is Erica Sager. I served as the first principal on the audit for fiscal year 22. As Ed mentioned, there's 2 booklets in front of you. The first one is our required communications. It's the one with the picture on the front. We'll go through that first. The first page is a letter from our firm to you expressing our gratitude to serve again as your independent auditors and your business advisors for fiscal year 22. And it also says that a direct line of communication between Crossland and the board is a very important part of the audit process. And it also thanks Ed and his team for being ready for us for the audit. Everything was ready as usual, and we really, really appreciate that. It makes for a smooth and efficient audit process. So thank you for that. At the top of page 2, our report on the results of the June 30, 2022 audit. As Ed mentioned, it is an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. That is the best opinion you can receive. MTA is a component unit of Metro, and the state of Tennessee does have oversight responsibility for the audit process. We did submit a contract to audit with the state, and they did approve that for our audit for 22. Our responsibilities under generally accepted auditing standards is to plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable rather than absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement and that they're presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. At the top of page 3, significant accounting policies of MTA are included in Note A to the financial statements. We did review those. There was only one significant change from the prior year, and that is the implementation of a new GASB standard during fiscal year 22. That's GASB standard number 87 related to leases. So we will go over that information shortly. Management's judgment and estimates. There are sensitive judgments and estimates that do affect MTA's financial statements. They've been listed here for you. We did look at and evaluate the basis for these judgments and estimates and did determine that they are reasonable in relation to the financials taken as a whole. At the top of page 4, there were no alternative accounting treatments. We did have a few audit adjustments during fiscal year 22. The majority of them related to the implementation of the new GASB 87 lease standard. There were a few entries that were given to us by management after they gave us the trial balance. We looked at those in conjunction with our substantive procedures, and there were no unrecorded entries. We did require representations from management. They did sign the management representation letter, and it's included in this booklet in Appendix A. We also had a management letter for fiscal year 22, which is included in Appendix B, and we'll go over that in just a few minutes as well. Top of page 5, we had no disagreements with management. Consultations with other independent accountants. In some cases, management might seek to talk to another firm or other auditors about certain accounting matters. Although that's really rare, if it happens, professional standards require that the consulting firm talk to us to make sure that they have all the relevant facts. And to our knowledge, there were no such consultations with other accountants. Other than signing the engagement letter for fiscal year 22, there were no other issues discussed prior to our retention as independent auditors. We had no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. And during the audit, we did not identify any fraudulent or illegal acts, nor were any disclosed to us by management or the board. MTA's financial statements are included in Metro's financial statements, and we do look at that in conjunction with the issuance of their act for every year. Top of page 6 are our areas of audit emphasis. These are very similar to the prior year. Again, the biggest change that happened in 22 was the implementation of the new lease standard. We are independent with respect to MTA. And then on pages 6 through 9, our recent accounting pronouncements. So as you all know, each year that I'm here, I tell you there are more and more standards that are becoming effective. And as they do become effective, we will work with management to make sure that they are implemented correctly. Pages 10 through 18 is Appendix A. Again, this is the management representation letter. And basically what this says is that management has represented to us that everything they provided during the audit was complete and accurate. And you can see that that has been signed by various members of management. Pages 19 through 21 are the management letter for fiscal year 22. In planning and performing our audit, we do look at MTA's internal controls as a basis for designing our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on those controls. And during that testing, we did note 2 items that we wanted to bring to your attention. The first one is related to disbursements. During our internal control testing, we did note that 2 out of our 40 items had invoices that were dated prior to the signed purchase order, which it falls out of the scope of MTA's policy. It was noted that there was a change in directors for the year. And so we did recommend that MTA emphasize all controls during the onboarding process to ensure that controls don't slip through the cracks when there is turnover in personnel. So management did concur with that observation, and they do agree, and will ensure that those controls are in place. So we will again test those controls during the fiscal year 23 audit as well. The second item had to do with our single audit testing. One of the items that's required to be tested when you spend federal funds is suspension and debarment testing. And during the testing, we noted that for one vendor, they were not registered on the SAMS database. Therefore, we could not determine whether there was any potential suspension or debarment. We recommended to MTA that they follow the procurement policy to ensure that all vendors are signed up on the SAMS database to ensure that MTA can monitor any potential future suspension or debarment. Management did concur with that, and they did provide us with the vendors' self-certifications. And since that time, that vendor has signed up on the SAMS database, and they're just waiting for approval. And then finally on pages 22 and 23, this is the detail of the audit adjustments that I spoke about previously. Again, the majority of them relate to the implementation of GASB 87 for fiscal year '22. Are there any questions on the required communications? Okay. So now we'll flip over to the second booklet, and these are the financial statements. We'll start out on pages 3 through 6. This is the independent auditor's report, and there's some, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's an unmodified or clean opinion. But during the year, there were some new significant auditing standards that were issued, which significantly affected the independent auditor's report. So there are 4 major changes within this report that I'll go over. The first is you can see that the first section is now the opinion. So the opinion is the most important part of your financial statements. You want to know what your opinion is and whether it was an unmodified opinion. So that has been moved to the front of the report. The second item in the basis of opinions paragraph, we've always been required to be independent of MTA, but now we're required to explicitly state that in our independent auditor's report. We do have an emphasis of matter paragraph after the basis of opinion paragraph, and basically it says that with the implementation of GASB 87, we did have to restate the prior year financial statements in order to implement the standard, but our opinion is not modified with respect to that matter. The third major change is towards the bottom. We are now required to include management's responsibilities over the financial statements. So they have been included here for you. Then on page 4, the fourth major change is we're also now required to include the auditor's responsibilities for the financial statements. One of the key changes, we've always been required to communicate with you our planning and our results of the audit, which we do at the board meetings, but now we're required to explicitly state that we had those conversations with you. The next thing to go over is pages 7 through 20. This is management's discussion and analysis, and it highlights the key financial highlights throughout fiscal year '22. Okay. So to the financials themselves, if you flip over to pages 21 and 22, this is the statements of net position. And I'll go over some of the more significant changes from fiscal year 21 to 22. Cash and cash equivalents are down mainly due to the additional payments on the line of credit. Receivables from federal, state, and local governments, you can see that those are down significantly from the prior year, and that's just due to the timing of receipts before year end compared to last year. There are some restricted cash and cash equivalents, and those are related to the insurance proceeds from related to the bus fire. They're required to be held separately in a restricted cash account. Property and equipment, you can see that significantly decreased over the prior year. And that's mainly due to the fact that there were $8.7 million in additions, which was offset by approximately $24.4 million in current year depreciation expense. With the implementation of GASB 87, you're going to see some new line items on your statements of net position, the first being a right of use lease asset. So with the implementation of the new standard, any of your significant leases are now required to be reported on the face of your financial statements as a right to use asset and a right to use liability. So the lease that this is referring to is the ground lease that MTA has. And, for North Nashville. So GASB 87, when you implement it, you're required to look at the term of the lease, plus if you're expected to renew any options of that lease. So if you'll remember, the lease is a 50-year lease with 2 10-year optional renewals. And it's reasonably certain that you guys are going to continue with that lease for the full 70 years. So we have put that lease on here. It's now represented more like a capital lease than an operating lease. So what will happen is we've put the present value of all the future lease payments on here. We had to restate the prior year, so $7 million. That asset will amortize down over the 70 years. And in addition to that, if you look at page 22, you'll see a right to use lease liability. So this is the liability that's going to sit on the financial statements until the fiscal year 2073. So the reason that it's very strange.
Gail, will you still be chair?
Margaret and I were just saying, you're
Exactly.
very optimistic to think that we'll be extending that lease.
Yeah, I'll be just moseying my way on in here, way down those.
This is it's a very unusual standard, and so for when you have leases that are this long, it makes the presentation very strange.
I asked
So-
her to give her own personal opinion of this new GASB rule, but she refused.
It's not a very nice opinion. So, but basically, in the standard, all of the payments that are made must first be applied to your interest payments. So because the payments are smaller than the future minimum payments of the entire lease over the 70 years, all your payments are going to be hitting your accrued, like reducing that accrued interest expense account. So until 2073 is when that catches up with each other and you start paying principal. So it looks very strange. So you will see that the asset will continue to amortize until until the end of it. But your liability on page 22 will stay the $7,049,599 until 2073. At that point, you will see that liability start to be relieved. It's a lot to absorb. Then for your deferred outflows of resources and your deferred inflows of resources, as well as your net pension liability and your OPEB liability, all of these balances were based off the actuary valuations that were performed by a specialist. We did look at those valuations to determine that the estimates were reasonable and that the assumptions used were reasonable. At the top of page 22, notes payable, the balance at year end, this is related to your line of credit, was zero. All of that was paid off during the year. And then middle of the page, your net pension liability, you can see that that significantly decreased over the prior year from 16 million to 4.2 million. The major reason for that decrease is related to the net investment income on the assets that has been set aside to pay those pension liabilities. Then right underneath that, you have your OPEB liabilities, your other post-employment benefits. You can see that that balance significantly decreased as well. So 103 million to 79 million. And there's several factors that are causing that decrease. The first one being the discount rate. The discount rate was increased from 2.18% to 4.09%. So with an increase in discount rate, you get a decrease in your liabilities. The second item was related to changes of assumptions, and then also a clarification of the plan benefits. Those two items together, that's where you saw the most significant decrease in that balance. Moving on to page 23, this is your statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. The most significant things to point out, passenger fares have recovered back to approximately 80% of pre-pandemic ridership levels, which is causing those fares to increase. Your labor and fringe benefits have decreased significantly from 71 million to 43 million, and that's mainly due to your decreases in your pension and OPEB liabilities, those costs. Non-operating revenues are up mainly due to your local operating assistance. And then you can see that your capital contributions are down significantly from the prior year. And that's due to the fact that there were fewer eligible capital grant contributions being utilized in 2022 versus 2021. The next couple of pages are your statement of cash flows, followed by your statements of fiduciary net position. This pages 26 and 27. This was implemented last year, GASB 84, for your fiduciary activities. And this relates to all of your assets that are being held to pay for your pension and OPEB benefits. But I want to point out that all of it is related to your pension. There are no assets set aside to pay for your OPEB liabilities because it's on a pay-as-you-go basis. Pages 28 through 34, these are your significant accounting policies. And again, the only changes within the significant accounting policies relate to the implementation of GASB 87. So one thing that I do want to point out to you is if you flip to page 34, because of the change in accounting principle, we did have to restate the prior year balance. And so this chart at the bottom shows you what your previous net position was and what all the changes were to get your restated net position. And again, it's only related to that lease for North Nashville. Along with the implementation, if you flip to page 42, the remaining pages in here are the notes to the financials. They represent the more significant line items on your financials. But pages 42 through 44 and then 85 and 86, these are all the additional pages of disclosures and information that are required to be reported for your one lease that you have. So lots of reading if you would like to do that. Then we'll flip to pages 70 through 79. This is your required supplementary information, and all of this information is related directly to your pension and OPEB obligations. Pages 80 through 89 are your supplementary information, and all of these are schedules that are required by the state of Tennessee. Let's see. Pages 90 and 91. This is our independent auditor's report over internal control. As I mentioned previously, we don't have any findings. We just had the management letter that we went over. Pages 92 and 93. This is our independent auditor's report on compliance for each major program. So this is where we tested your federal funds for single audit purposes. And we had no findings related to single audit testing as well. Just the one potential management letter comment that we went over. Finally, on pages 95 and 96, this is your schedule of findings and questions costs. And as you can see on page 96, we did not have any significant deficiencies. We did not have any compliance findings, and we did not have any findings or questions costs. And then finally, page 97, the state requires that we report to you the status of any prior year findings, but MTA did not have any prior year findings. Are there any questions? I'm happy to discuss leases further if you would like me to.
I would just say hats off to Ed and his team, because this is not a simple audit, and this is not a simple organization, and
She's not going to tell you how long we had conversations about GASB 87.
oh, I bet it was so fun. I'm so sorry I missed those.
Yes.
But it's really impressive to come up with a clean audit for something so complex.
And again, thank you to Steve and Ed and the team. They're wonderful to work with, and we really appreciate their help.
Look forward to working with you on the 50-year restatement of the,
Exactly.
I know. I'll still be here. I'll be 100 and something, but I'll still be here and bringing all the historical knowledge that I bring all the time.
Well, just for fun, if you want to see it, if you look on page 86, it gives you your schedule of lease requirements by year, and you can take a look at that. It's a lot of fun to look at. This is a new schedule required by the state as well. Well, thank you again. We appreciate
Social
it.
Security, it does that too.
Thank you for your presentation. I thought you really drew our attention to where we needed to be while, assuming as we do that we have read the information. So I appreciate that. No, I do appreciate it because this is what I do for a living. I'm in compliance and audit. So I think this was very well laid out. Shocking in a good way. I rarely ever see an audit this clean, but I know you all are a very reputable company, and I know that our team is that good. So, thank you. I want to thank, both of y'all on this, because I think it's very well presented, and we have what we need as a reference as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, good to see you.
And Madam Chair, this is an
Yes.
action item for adoption.
Okay, well, I will turn this to Mr. Cersey and see if there's a recommendation from the committee.
Considering it.
You consider? I know that GASB 87 or whatever, you know, it's really something for us to take in.
It's really 68 that, Gatsby 68 that.
Oh, it's the
We
68 one?
really want to focus on. That'll help us understand. 87. Well, I defer to the professionals in this matter, and I suggest that Ed has, to this point, not led us astray. I don't see why we should think that he would do so now. His recommendation is fairly clear, and I pass it to the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cersey, and I will echo everyone else's sentiments. A job well done, Ed and staff, and it's nice to see you all work so well together. So with that being said, are there any further comments? Any additions, deletions? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Don't get a big head, Ed.
Don't worry.
Get a big headache, yes. All right, let's have our monthly operating statistics. Mr. Burke, are you ready to deliver?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you can see in your packets on page 15 for the operations dashboard statistics for the month of September. Normally this month, this item is an informational item, but this month we wanted to take it to discussion to provide an opportunity to review and answer any questions you may have. So some changes to document, but still keeping to a format historically known in the past is provided. You'll note that the goals and targets have been added with an added column for a visual indicator to gravitate toward. So as noted in your packets, green circle means that we're meeting or exceeding our targets. Yellow triangle means that we're performing below goal, but still within 10% of those targets and goals. And then the red diamond means that we're off by our target by about 10%. So maybe indicating an anomaly that we need to continue to monitor and address. To get to these targets and goals projected here, staff reviewed a number of different factors in determining where to get these performance metrics put together. Some of these factors include historical performance, recent trends, industry standards and benchmarks, and also internal and external factors affecting them, such as Nashville, traffic conditions, school hours, supply chain issues, and what have you. I'll highlight a couple items in here. For one, I don't want to take the thunder away from some of our presentations ahead of us, but Katie will be presenting some information on ridership in our quarterly reports, but I'm happy to say that we've been able to put out more service than a lot of other agencies in the country. You guys may have been reading in the news that many agencies are continuing to cancel service, whereas we've been adding service and continue to do so. So I'm happy to say that ridership continues to gain traction quicker than most as well. One area that we do want to focus on is our maintenance positions continues to be an area that we do want to put focus on. With our maintenance positions responsible for ensuring our fleet is always in a good state of repair and safe for our operators and passengers. We're currently working on expanding our apprenticeship program to grow over the next couple of years to really tackle this area in terms that this is not just a transit industry issue. That mechanics are hard to come by these days, so really kind of putting some resources into helping folks identify career paths, building up onto our apprenticeship program is something that we're really excited to gain some traction and look forward to. The other thing I want to highlight is our bus trip completion continues to be consistent and reliable for our riders with a 99.79% trip completion. A lot goes into ensuring buses are not only running due to operators being in seats, buses being maintained, our dispatchers controlling service, but a lot goes into ensuring that our buses stay in service and continue to perform in serving our passengers. So with that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
And to Andy's point, the main reason for us putting it on the discussion agenda was the fact that we're adding targets. So we wanted to make sure that folks had a chance to take a look at the targets, provide any feedback or things you'd like.
I love
more
it. You all know
explanation
it's always bothered me. I'm like, I don't know what success looks like, so this is a really great graphic way. Just one suggestion, you might on this put a footer that contains what the red, green, yellow means, so that if somebody outside of the organization were to see it, they'd understand the metrics of it. But I'm so happy with our red, green, yellow coding, so.
Happier with the green than the red, though, right?
Green's always good.
All green is good.
I like it too. I would just ask if you could make the print just a
Slightly bigger.
smidge bigger.
I
And when-
promise I didn't set Gail up with that comment. As the old guy on staff, I'm usually the one who's offering that opinion.
Yeah, and then, because, I'm going to be here to the end of that lease, so it's going to really have to get bigger. So we just want to start practicing now. I do that.
Thank you very much, and I echo having a key box on that, just because you never know who'll pull a page out, and, I think that's always helpful. What more would you be able to tell us about the cost per scheduled revenue hour, just so I can understand a little bit better on that one?
So typically, there's a lot of different elements that go into our cost per service hour, overtime, medical expenses. So for this particular month, we did have a little bit more in our expenses with medical. And typically, you're going to have some range in this due to, each month. And I'm going to kind of lean on making sure that I'm getting this right. Ed can help out with.
You are, you're going to have fluctuations on it because you're taking a picture at the end of a month. It's probably a better idea to concentrate on the year-to-date because the ebbs and flows within the financials on a month-to-month basis and timing issues are going to cause one month to maybe look really strange, but concentrating on the year-to-date will flatten those out. Because if you do look at the year-to-date, you can see it's a much closer target at 146.94.
The other thing I'd add to that is because it's normalized on hours of service and the plan through the course of the year, as Andy alluded to earlier, was we would be adding service hours. You've also got a denominator problem in that service hours during first quarter aren't as many as you would expect toward the end of the year. And the target number for this one is specifically set off of the operating budget that you adopt, where we have a budgeted number of service hours and a budgeted amount of operating expense.
I think that's helpful. I think, again, when you're talking, I wasn't paying attention on this particular one. I know formatting is always hard when they're laid side by side. I think sometimes I'm jumping around. I don't have good eyesight either, so I joined that pack. And I don't know that it's appropriate for all of them, but it also occurs to me that, when you get your medical scores back from blood work, for example, I think we all have to get that for our health insurance now. They'll often put a range of what normal is because you don't know what that is either. I mean, maybe you guys do, but I don't know anything about I don't know about cholesterol. I don't know, and it's always helpful to look at, and I'm not saying on all of them, but if that would apply somewhere, it could be helpful to say, a range, a normal range would be, and then you again, have a little bit better understanding on a face. And it's just a thought. I think this is great, and I'm really happy, about the direction that you all are heading. I am familiar with the red light, green light approach. We adopted that, and it was, I think executives often like that. It's a real quick, snapshot, so thank you.
Yeah, one other thing I'll add is that in the narratives, we've asked a lot of our senior staff to make sure they're presenting a story for the areas of their focus areas, like safety, customer service, because there's a lot of exciting initiatives that everybody's kind of working on, and I think it's a good opportunity to, here's the numbers, here's the performance indicators, but what are the indicators that are actually leading into that? And I think there's an opportunity to present that in our narratives to kind of shine the light on some of the good areas and also show and build some confidence in the areas that we're working on to improve.
Yeah, I echo what's been said. I thank you for putting this together and being willing and flexible to change so we can understand a little bit better about your reports and how this is working on the front line there. I was curious, kind of similar to what Mary said in terms of like the range, like what's a normal range here? Are these numbers specific to WeGo or are they aspirational toward, like other best practices? I mean, how do we arrive at these numbers?
Yeah, so a lot of them, so some of them are based on historical trends that WeGo's had, but we've also taken a look at benchmark compared to other agencies and just industry standards as well. So a mix of that, and just taking all that into consideration to determine these goals. Some of them are fairly aggressive, for one, for safety preventable collisions. We kind of are taking an aggressive approach to, because we obviously want to reduce our preventable accidents. So that's going to be an area that we're going to be continuously focused on, issuing, initiatives to, kind of hone in on particular areas that, for instance, side swipes is typically what we see the most is just mirror taps and that kind of stuff. But a lot of that's, narrow streets. Some of that's non-preventable, but some of that can be preventable. And those are the things that we want to kind of tackle.
The other thing I'd highlight is there's give and take among some of the metrics, and probably one of the better examples is if you look at under productivity and efficiency, under access passengers per revenue hour, historically the target we've been setting was 2.0, and you'll see it's been reduced to 1.75. But one of the findings we had out of the access improvement study was there was frankly a little bit too much emphasis on the productivity, and it was at the expense of on-time performance. So basically by relaxing that schedule constraint a little bit, you're also able to see the on-time performance for access kind of bump up. So the challenge is to get them all, it's kind of like balancing a medication, right? It's, if I get too much of one, then something else goes sour. So it is. And Jessica, to your point, there are some industry standards on things like, miles between row calls is a pretty good example where you can benchmark pretty easily. But for instance, on-time performances, I mean, I've talked to my peers from like the biggest cities in the country who were here for APTA a couple of years ago, and they're like, we don't have anything like getting through Lower Broadway on a Saturday night. So to some extent, you've got to kind of, look at your own historical information and temper it with what's realistic in your operating condition. The WeGo Star runs at 98, 99% on time. Typically, there's nothing on the track in front of it. So, we have that capacity, but when we're operating in mixed traffic.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to assume what you were thinking, right? So I still appreciate it. And I like the guideposts. I mean, it's not like a perfect, track. It's not a fixed track. So I like that there's at least some guidance here for us to see how we're operating, right? Otherwise, how would we know? So I appreciate it.
And I think the interesting thing for you to watch over time when it comes to the indicators is, I mean, some are gonna move up and down, green to yellow, yellow to green, what have you. But the ones I'd be concerned about as a board member is the one that stays red, 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 red. Goes from there. I mean, a couple of them, even a couple of the yellows, because it's a pretty hard indicator of, well, if we're within 10%, if we're at below budget or below goal, but within 10%, it's yellow. So even if you're 0.001% worse than goal, it's going to be yellow. But, and ridership, percentage of ridership, pre-pandemic ridership is a good example, showing up as yellow at 84.8 when the target is 85. So pretty darn close to green.
Right, and to Ed's point, I think they change also. Some yellows switch to green when you look at year-to-date over monthly.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's nice to see this.
But again, if there's any additional, we will likely, unless there's something super unusual, likely put it back on the information only category in future months. But clearly throughout, as you look at it, if there's changes or clarifications or bigger or smaller type or different footnotes, we can make those adjustments.
What it really says is that the WeGo staff and team is holding themselves to a really high standard. And as a board member and a resident who takes WeGo buses from time to time, I can really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Andy, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from Katie regarding quarterly route performance report.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today I'll be reviewing the quarterly performance report for July through September 2022. As Andy mentioned, we've seen our ridership continue to increase. Last quarter, we were at about 80% of pre-pandemic numbers. This quarter, that went up to 90%. Preliminarily, we do expect to see that flatten a little bit in this coming quarter. I do want to talk a little bit about the 90% of pre-pandemic ridership and put that in context. So in October 2019, we cut service by about 10% due to budget constraints, including elimination of several routes and a restructuring of most of our busiest corridors. So that was in October 2019. By February 2020, we were starting to see COVID impacts on our ridership. So as it turned out, October through December of 2019 was the only quarter where we had both our restructured service and ridership without any pandemic impacts. So we've been using that quarter as our pre to post-COVID comparison number. One of the flaws with that is that November and December both have major holidays with Thanksgiving and Christmas and relatively long school breaks. So we don't really have an apples to apples in terms of both route structure and time of year. So that 90% is probably a little bit higher than we would be seeing if we truly had that July to September timeframe to compare to. That said, next quarter we will be seeing comparable year over year or year over 3 years ago route structure and time of year. So we're interested to see those for sure.
Katie, can I ask you a question? So if we're at 90%, but we also know that the Stride program is down and we also know that a lot of people are still at home, does this mean we have new riders?
We are fairly confident that yes, this means we have new riders and more of them are, I guess, adults or non-youth. Yes, our adult ridership is growing faster than our Stride ridership.
So once Stride picks back up more and people start going back into the office, then we should really exceed where we were before, under theory.
If Stride were to return to pre-COVID levels and or people started going back into the office, I think if those things do happen.
I guess the only caveat I would put on that was, when we saw the patterns developing, particularly with respect to office commuters, we basically moved a lot of the commuter resource into those core routes. So you'll probably get into that in your report, Katie, but a lot of what you're seeing, for instance, Dickerson Pike ridership was way up, but we put a lot more service on Dickerson Pike, reallocating it from some of those commuter-oriented corridors. So that might dampen some of that impact.
Something that I'm very curious to see from our origin destination report, one of the things that we ask customers is how long they've been riding WeGo. And I think we're going to see different answers this time than we have in the past. I think I could be wrong, but anything? Okay. No, thank you. I also wanted to take a look at Route 79 Skyline. This route was a new route that started in April 2022, so this is the second quarter that it's been in operation. Last quarter, it had around 3 passengers per hour. We've seen a 50% increase in that number, so it's around 5 passengers per hour now, which is obviously lower than we'd like to see it ultimately. But we do think this is a promising early sign that it's increasing because it is a new service in an area that had no transit service for the last 2 years. And we would expect to see that number hopefully continue to increase for about the next year and a half for the first 2 years of the route being in operation. As people start to, look at being able to sign leases where they wouldn't previously have had transit access, as they start looking at jobs in that area that they didn't previously have access to, start making appointments with new doctors or going to businesses that they didn't previously go to. So again, we're hoping to see for about a year and a half for that to continue to go up and then kind of level off. And then I want to touch on our high-performing routes. Last quarter, the Route 55 Murfreesboro Pike was above pre-pandemic numbers. This quarter, we have 4 routes above their pre-COVID ridership. We've got the 18 Airport Elm Hill Pike, Route 23 Dickerson Pike, the 52 Nolensville Pike, and then of course the 55. You'll also notice that 3 of the 4 of those, the 18, the 52, and the 55, have among the worst on-time performance in our system. Besides their strong ridership, they have a couple other things in common. They have 4th and Broadway, and they run parallel or as alternatives to I-24. So next month, we'll be presenting proposed service changes for spring of 2023, and we will have additional resources proposed for those routes. But again, like we talked about a little bit last time, until we have a solution to downtown and a solution to getting through congestion, our goal is really to keep those stable, just to prevent them from declining further. We don't expect them to improve significantly. And then of those 4 routes, 3 of them are on our frequent network, the 23, the 52, and the 55. The 18 is a local route that operates every 45 to 60 minutes, and it operates differing service patterns. Sometimes it operates local, sometimes express, sometimes local one direction, express the other. And, you know, as I mentioned, it has some pretty significant on-time performance issues. So for the spring, we'll be proposing to add another bus to that route on the weekends so that it can operate a simpler, more predictable schedule, local in both directions, as well as more on time, so that we can support that growing ridership on that route. And that concludes my report, unless you have any other questions. Thank you.
I do.
Yes.
What does it mean to add another bus?
Sorry. So right now, the 18 is operating on 1 bus that makes a trip every hour. So what we'll be doing is adding another bus to it so that it operates every 45 minutes on a 90-minute loop, so that it has more time to stay on time and comes more frequently. Sorry.
Great job, Katie.
Yeah. Hearing no questions. Marvelous job. All right, well, let's have operations dispatch overview from our former mayor.
Yes. I was just finna say, former MTA mayor.
That's right.
Yes. I'm Carl Dean, I'm the dispatch manager. I'm here to give you an overview of what the dispatcher does. What we do on the daily. Pretty much for every operator that you see out on the street, whether they're on the bus or on the van, they have to come through my team. We pretty much, we sign them in, we get them detour information, or if they need scheduling, or if they need vehicle assignment, they pretty much get it from my team. Another thing that we do is we also offer support, like far as if someone needs to call out, or if it's absent, or say if we need extra bodies for a charter or something happens, they'll pretty much come through us with any exceptions. We pretty much manage the workforce in the operations. So I have a couple of slides for you. One thing we do outside of managing the pullouts and taking the phone calls and answer the questions, we are over the assignments. So twice a year, the operators conduct a pick schedule where we call it a markup. They come in and they pick their schedules. The shifts can range from a day shift to a late straight, which is a midday run, a split shift, which is going to require somebody to come to work twice, AM and PM, and a night service. Going back to handle that exceptions, that's when the operators are going out on vacations, they're going out on flex days, sick days, or any call-outs, or any extra service like cold weather, if we got to transport people to a shelter or move a group of people from one area to another because of a major event. We pretty much over that. We also offer 24/7 operation support. That way we can ensure that someone is always available 24/7 to make the necessary adjustments if something happens. Now, this is just a scenario, it's an illustration. So, just to give you just an example of a metric of some of the things that we pretty much look at. From our service reliability team, they might schedule 130 fixed routes. SS might need 33 SS runs, and we might project that we would need 52 extra board operators to cover everything that's going on. So that'll give us 215 operators. But the problem that we're running into is that we only be left with 170, which leaves my team to have to exhaust all their resources to cover the other 45 spots. So here's just example of from where we was at, the actual manpower versus what's required. Back in 2019, we was losing a lot of service back then in those areas. When we got into the pre-COVID schedules, we end up having a lot of people on staff. So we end up we didn't have as many problems as we did in 2019. So we kind of like even out. But as we go back to full service in the springtime, as you can see, those numbers are going back to what we was recently at in 2019. However, the only difference is we're not cutting as many routes because with the new operators that's coming on board, a lot of them are volunteering to help out, and especially with the rebalancing of the extra board, which is a group of people that does a lot of the call-outs or the open runs. It's kind of helping out to keep us at good numbers, so we're not getting a lot of cuts. So we did make some improvements along the way to kind of help out, to also keep us from going back to those 2019 days where we was having all those cuts. And one of the improvements that we made that I'm really excited about is enhancing our communication techniques. One of them is an absent log sheet that the managers got along, well, we all got together and we created this sheet to kind of do some conversing and keep in tune with what's going on with the absentees, like the call outs, to track patterns or to even see if there's ways to add in some incentives to help promote people to actually, want to come to work. Another thing we did was we changed the phone system. It was originally going into a call center. By changing it to a business line, it actually helps out because with the radio controller and the SS dispatch, as well as bus dispatch, if you call into dispatch, those phone calls transfer into an operator that's available to actually answer. So that actually really helped out a lot. And we also was able to, in July, when that budget came in, was able to add in 2 new dispatchers, which actually pushed us to be 24/7 dispatcher. Also with some rebalancing with the extra board, that helped out a lot when people was coming on board and we was looking at the system to see where we was performing poorly at. We was able to find out that it was in the night service and the weekend service. A lot of the new operators coming on board, they're not used to working weekends and they're requesting to be off. And a lot of people don't want to work too late because they got families and they want to get home at a decent time. So by rebalancing those extra board positions, it really helped out a lot and kept us from having to deal with a lot of cuts and improving those areas. As you can see with this particular screen, during the pandemic days, we had overage. We had a lot of overages with operators. I mean, we even added in 99 bus service. I know you have heard that term. Those are the operators that pretty much we stagger them around the city and have them in standby areas, and they just fill in when service go down. So we was able to actually add in some 99s, but we still was dealing with operators just standing by in the hall. But as we begin to go back to full service as well as increase our hour numbers, we starting to see it creep back up, but we still had a steady flow. It didn't really affect us as much. So even with the rebalancing of the extra board and with a lot of enhancements that we did, it kind of kept us leveled out. So, just going up, I'm close to the end of my presentation, but with everything that we're going on, even with the enhancements and the add-ons that we're actually doing, my only hope is that we get more operators so we can continue to perform at the levels in which we are. That's all I have for you. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say that I know bus operator shortages are a nationwide issue. Transit Center has issued a report called Bus Operators in Crisis, actually. So looking at this in terms of globally, I think that some transit agencies, and I know, Steve, you would probably know this more than I would, are having to like cut routes or really pull back service because their bus operator shortages. I'm happy to see that our shortages are nowhere near some of our peer agencies, right?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely true. I don't have a percentage number, but a huge percentage, if not the majority of agencies are still below their pre-pandemic service levels, not because ridership necessarily hasn't returned, but because they just don't have the people to operate it. And giving additional shout outs. So in addition to being the former mayor, Carl is also one of the most gracious and non-ego based persons I know.
Yes.
The accomplishments he's made, when he talks about rebalancing the extra board, what that means is there were certain times in what I'll call the olden days where, yeah, we're cutting service on a weekend or late at night, and yet if you go in at a certain other point in the day, there's half a dozen folks sitting in the crew room waiting for something to happen. So he really did take an analytic approach when he took the job less than a year ago to say, well, where do we need the help? And rather than just saying, well, this is where we needed it 30 years ago, so that must be where we need it now, he was able to rebalance that. And I always said that the dispatcher, I tell every class of operators, most important job in any transit agency is the bus operator, and that's 100,000% true. Probably the second most important job is the dispatcher.
Yes.
Our bus operators spend 95% of their time away from the building. They're out. First face they see when they come in, last face they see when they leave is the dispatcher. So having that person set up with the right information, with the right paddle, which is actually their turn-by-turn schedule, and frankly, just somebody who kind of shows that they care, has a smile on their face, maybe a kind word or two to say, is super important. I think if you all have seen Carl around, so I think you know if anybody has the right demeanor.
Oh, yeah, well, the operators, we have, well, I won't say party, but.
Show up at dispatch in the off hours. And then the other thing I have to really compliment him on is he mentioned that we have been able to add dispatch staff to go to 24/7, which is critically important because otherwise you end up coming in first thing in the morning and not only are you getting ready for service to go out, but you're trying to catch up on whatever happened in the 4 hours that we didn't have anybody there. But what that also means is out of his 10 dispatchers, 5 of them have less than 1 year in the job. So that's all being done with folks who, frankly, are even going to get better and better over time.
Carl, that deserves a round of applause. Oh my gosh, my man.
I would say that it's with my motivation and my encouragement. You know, I tell people this story all the time. When I was 10 years old, I took my first bus ride alone. And ever since then, I was adopted into transit. And WeGo was the first one, well, back then it was Nashville MTA, but they was the first one to actually give me my dream job. And I am honored to say that I'm a manager here and I love this place. I love every time Ms. Gail always say that we're working together as a team because that is the truth. I have such support from Katie, from anybody in this organization. I have been given a whole lot of support. And that's what's making a lot of people, especially here we go, a success story, even with my dispatchers, being that they're less than a year. Anywhere that we go, any door we knock on, people are ready to help. So thank you all.
I was going to ask a question.
Go.
what can we do to help with the bus driver situation? I mean, how can we help spread the word?
Well,
How-
I love Jessica initiative, seeing it on LinkedIn, you know, just raising awareness for more funding for transit. That is pretty cool because that'll actually
Okay.
help us out a lot.
So that does even help to,
That does help,
okay.
you know,
And even
because we
as-
can give more incentives for the operators. They would love it.
Nice thing about the operator side, and Andy referred to the maintenance, and that's more of a challenge because that's a longer term to get somebody skilled up for the technician positions. But we're seeing great success with, you know, up till probably 2 years ago, is Kim here? You know, we essentially required you to have a CDL to come in the door. And now that we're doing the CDL training ourselves and saying, you don't have to have a CDL, you may never have driven anything bigger than a minivan before. We'll bring you in the door and train you. Not only are we getting a larger number of people, but we're getting a wider diversity of folks.
Yes.
You know, people who have more what I'll call customer service backgrounds. Coming in with a CDL, if you were an 18-wheel truck driver, that's great. You can drive a big vehicle, but other than that, it bears no resemblance to the job you're taking here. So, so we're hopeful with that. So I would say, Mary, that, you know, encouraging folks to take a look at it. And it's a career track position. We did another graduation of new operators yesterday, and I asked the crew of managers who were in the room to raise their hands if they started at WeGo behind the wheel of a bus. And I'm going to say at least a third to a half of the room raised their hands. So even beyond, you know, you say, well, I may not want to drive a bus for the rest of my life. Some people do. But even if you don't, you can end up in Carl's seat. You can end up in Nick's seat. You could end up in Patrick's seat. You know, we have a wide variety of folks who have really ascended to the highest levels of leadership here from that driver's seat.
You can't have Carl's seat. Carl's going to keep Carl's seat.
No, Carl's after my seat.
Well, he might get that, Steve. I like Carl Dean a lot.
Carl's going to be the one recommending the renewal of the lease on North Nashville.
Hey, I got that. I'm not going to deny.
Thank you. That was, from both of you. Thank you very much. It's helpful to know even which channel, you know, is the place to promote. So thank you.
Carl thinks. Or Mayor thinks. I will concede that.
He's living up to it.
Yeah, oh yeah, without a doubt. Madam Chairman, I'm going to pass the gavel back to you for the nice committee.
Thank you, Mr. Searcy. What a great work today from everyone. Thank you very much. Ms. Miller, anything for nice?
So we had the Title VI program update scheduled for today. I think we all know flu's running around, COVID's running around, RSV's running around. So Hannah is not with us today, so we're going to defer that item until a later date. So with that, nothing else for the NICE committee.
Well, thank you, Ms. Miller. I'm going to turn this over to you, Mr. Bland, for your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to continue to thank the board for your ongoing support for the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. North Nashville Transit Center, even though apparently it will be a pain in Ed's neck for the next 70 years. And Erica's, sorry about that, guys.
Or a pain in somebody's neck.
As you all know, last week we had the opportunity to actually break ground on that facility. I believe, I haven't been by there lately, but there's actually like real work happening, in staggering terms. We had a great turnout to the groundbreaking. Absolutely thankful that Gail and Janet and Jessica were able to make it, and sorry that Walter and Mary were under the weather and were not able to make it, but I think we'd all agree it was a terrific event. We had a great lineup of speakers who actually kept on time. I'm like, when you have that many elected officials speaking, that's a real crapshoot. Deputy Governor, Commissioner of Transportation for Tennessee, Butch Ely was there to speak. Mayor Cooper was there, several of our council members. But I think I speak for everybody in attendance when we say the highlight and the best speaker of all, we saved for last with our own chair, who I think had most of us in tears and inspired and And as always, she had prepared remarks that she completely disregarded and spoke off the cuff. So we now, as I've been saying for months, now it can move a lot faster now that we have folks in suits out of the way, folks in hard hats on the way. And to that end, for each of the members, we have the commemorative shovel and hard hat combination there for you to take with you. And we're all anxiously looking forward to the next official events. I suspect along the way we'll do a couple hard hat tours. But next officially, we'll be shooting for April of 2024 for our grand opening in conjunction with our spring service changes of that year. We're also anxiously waiting Vince Malone to start in his role of Chief of Staff and Administration. He starts immediately after Thanksgiving. He was also at the event last week, and even though he's not officially with us, I know he's been meeting with a number of our staff and getting up to speed on a lot of issues. There are a lot of issues that he'll get to work on. So we're really looking very much forward to having Vince come on. A number of us, staff at the planning, operations, engineering level, have been meeting with NDOT, Metro Planning, representatives of Oracle to advance. Oracle's obviously working on the design of their campus, and they are working cooperatively with NDOT, ourselves, TDOT, to try to assure that the boulevard along the East Bank accommodates our future infrastructure needs, you know, including the potential for dedicated lane bus rapid transit with stations adjacent to the Oracle campus. So we're very grateful for that partnership, which is continuing to evolve. Also, in a similar vein, we continue to meet with NDOT, TDOT, and others, and the developers for the Midtown development, you know, associated with adjacent to the Beaman Auto dealerships, where you're going to see significant densification in the next few years, and looking at some pretty interesting potential transit applications in that corridor. So please stay tuned. Metro Planning has recently kicked off their revisioning study for the former Global Mall site down in Antioch, and you'll all recall that we have that area targeted for a regional transit center downstream. So we had the opportunity actually this morning to meet with the consultants that Metro Planning has hired, kind of talk about the requirements and the needs for that center, you know, and how that may evolve over time. So, and just so you're, as a reminder, that one's, from our perspective, is pretty far along, because we've actually gone most of the way through the federal environmental process to get clearance for that project to receive federal funding, and actually already have the first slug of federal funding with competitive funds in the amount of $4 million toward that project. So, as we said to planning, you should do good planning, you should be very deliberate, you should engage the public, but hurry up and tell us where we can put our center, and we'll get it in design. The technical and community advisory committees for NDOT's Connect Downtown Mobility Planning Project met within the last month to review some of the comments or review some of the issues and trends. The consultant team, along with NDOT, have issued their State of Downtown Mobility Report, so that's available on the project website. So I would encourage you all to look at that. There's a lot of pretty interesting information. A lot of it won't surprise you: pedal taverns, tour buses, traffic, pedestrians. Some of it probably will surprise you, so it's definitely a good reading experience. This month, Renuka and I also had the opportunity to meet with representatives of Mayor Cooper's Sustainability Advisory Committee, who want to support. One of the goals of the Sustainability Advisory Committee is obviously trying to reduce single occupant auto travel. So they were engaging with us to look to see how they might help us encourage folks to use mass transit. It's wrapping up, I believe, today. We hope at least some of you out there had the opportunity to have your picture taken with Elvis at WeGo Central. I think it's wrapping up in probably the next 10 minutes or so. But kind of as an extension of the WeGocation promotion program we had over the summer, we're partnering with Madame Tussauds Wax Museum out in Opry Mills to promote use of the 34 Opry Mills route. So they brought Elvis with them downtown, and it's a teaser. So if Elvis isn't your bag, if it's Keith Urban or somebody else, you can ride the 34 and check that out as well. And then I'll just close with a couple RTA items. I know for the RTA board, the long-awaited STAR Future Vision Study contract was awarded at their meeting yesterday, so we'll be working with Hatch Consulting Group, which is really a worldwide knowledgeable group on examining future options for the STAR, everything from how service might be expanded to how it might be retasked, to issues like station area development and what TOD might look like in some of those zones, and then looking at broader applications of the information we generate in some of our other commuter markets in the other regional sectors. And the Titans keep managing to pull victories out of their hat. And as long as they do that, a whole bunch of people go. And as long as a whole bunch of people go, a whole bunch of them are still using the STAR. So we continue to see terrific performance on the Titans Express, which, given the long-range plans for the East Bank, getting more folks to ride transit to stadium events is probably a good thing. So unless there are any questions, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Send them all to Green Bay.
Careful.
Never know. Anyone have any questions for Steve? Hearing none. Thank you, Steve. Great report. I just want to echo the Dr. Ernest Rip Patton Jr. groundbreaking ceremony. I thought it was amazing. It was incredible. It was a community event. It was just symbolic of what it's going to do for that community. And oddly enough, I belong to a service organization, and there was a health fair at the apartment complex across the street, and I had never known like how it's a horseshoe over there, and there's all this green space and a great community center, and you can look from the community center and actually see where this transit hub is going to be, and it just works in the community. You can just see it, you could just feel it. And so I sort of felt like Saturday doing my service project, I felt like, oh, this is just really all coming together very meaningfully. I could like feel it. So thank you. But it was a very moving, and it was transformational, I think, for North Nashville. A lot of people have worked hard in North Nashville to make certain that this came true. So I was glad to be a part of it. Carl, I think this was your first time presenting to the board. Well done, and thank you very much for coming to the table. You did a wonderful job, and your innovation and your creativity and the work that you're doing is meaningful, not just for your peers, but it's also for our riders. On Saturdays and Sundays when people have to get to where they have to get to know that you're sort of moving people on and around the board. It makes a big difference for our citizens. So thank you for all your hard and happy work. Because you're just like, I know, the smile, the energy, the will to make it work, and sometimes that's what it takes. Speaking of will to work, I want to turn this over to my colleague, Jessica. Jessica has been going around to recent industry events, and I think that she has some real good shining examples that she can share with the rest of us from some of your travels. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Jessica, my apologies. I have to run out the door. Can I call you tomorrow and get?
No.
Bye, Janet. Thank you.
But you can watch the stream once it's posted.
You can just turn it on in your car, Facebook Live.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have been able to kind of trot around the Southeast region to these different conferences, but one I want to talk about specifically today was in Austin, Texas in July, barely 11 days after I sustained my concussion. Probably shouldn't have been on a plane or going to a conference, but there I was in any case. It was held by the American Public Transit Association, otherwise known as APTA, and it's called the Transit Initiatives and Communities Workshop Program. It's an intimate gathering of experts, advocates, and transit agency representatives where they talk about either their recent transit referendum success or they are looking to go toward a referendum. So I went as the only Nashville representative because there is no referendum on the horizon for Nashville, but due to my role as the president and CEO of the Transit Alliance, I am extremely interested in how other cities have been walking that walk and talking that talk and what creates success in those cities and areas. So as you could imagine, it was pretty intimate. It was not a huge hundreds and thousands of people. It was just very small. I started out at a table We were talking networking regionally, so I sat at a table with Florida, Virginia, and Kentucky, for instance. And we were talking about the challenges we face being in the South, where we don't have a legacy system, where we have constrained rights of way, and where we have a particular car-centric culture that permeates all of our cities. So those were our similarities. I also got to hear policy deep dives from Beth Osborne, is a National Transportation for America kind of advocate, an advocacy organization. There was David Bragdon from Transit Center and Mary Ellen Wiederwall from Accelerator for America, which I had never heard of, and which was extremely interesting for me about what resources and research they can provide for cities. And what I learned, and I think this is going to come as no surprise to anyone in this room, is that the pandemic hit low-income neighborhoods disproportionately hard. That city downtowns are now weaker due to the persistence of remote work and structural changes in the spatial geography of employment, which we've talked about in this room at this board several times. And the pandemic is ushering in a new era of digital commerce, teleservices, and chain stores, which all of these things are really changing the way people transport themselves and at what times they're transporting themselves. And those aren't all of the challenges we discussed, but those were like the core ones. The good news that we learned there was that purposeful and deliberate strategies to drive an inclusive recovery are not theoretical, and that they rely in large part on better public transit and investing in public transit and mobility infrastructure, right? To help really lay a more equitable platform or foundation for access to opportunity for folks, especially those hit hardest in those lower income areas and traditionally disinvested communities. So one of the things that stuck out to me from that particular workshop or program was they had a mayoral panel, and the mayor from Phoenix, Arizona, and the mayor from Austin, Texas, Steve Adler, were there. And they were talking about their successes in the transit referendums they had recently. And the one thing that resonated with me was Mayor Steve Adler from Austin said the tilling of the soil was absolutely critical to their success. And what he meant by that was the purposeful, intentional, and consistent community engagement with their communities, which was led by their transit agency. And one of the also things I learned was that this process can be led by a mayor's office, it could be led by a transit agency, it can even be led by an advocacy organization. There's no one right way to do this work. It's all a matter of what works for your city and who can do the work. So that stuck out to me. And then the next thing was Linda Tran from USDOT was there, and she's buds with the secretary himself, Pete Buttigieg. And of course, she was so excited to share the new IIJA, because in July, I think it was brand new, right? It had not, I think, well, it was 6 months in. We just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the passage of it. So yes, more funding for transit, public transit and infrastructure, bigger buckets of funding, new buckets of funding. But she tempered that with, that means these competitive programs will be more competitive. More cities will be going out for this funding. Cities need to come with really solid local matches and projects that are ready to go. And she kind of stayed there for quite a bit, talking about the competitive nature of the FTA grants. Let's see, other highlights. It's no worries. Are you okay? Okay. So I came away with 6 steps that seem so simple, that I think Nashville's already on track, but setting a vision for transit in your city is step number 1, setting specific, ambitious, and attainable goals to realize that vision, identifying who can make those goals happen and hold those decision makers accountable, speaking from a writer's perspective with human stories and compelling statistics, using a variety of tactics to sustain pressure for change, support and create opportunities for transit officials and agency staff to implement new policies and practices, and of course, celebrating that process and that progress. Some other things are voter attitudes toward ballots initiatives are mixed. So really taking that into consideration when you start this process, if this process ever gets off the ground again in Nashville. Super broad coalitions are critical. And I just want to say that it's possible that communities by and large want better access to opportunities via multimodal transportation, especially public transit. And transit is, and it does help offset the cost of living and provides equitable access to higher wage jobs when challenges are confronted with communities and not for them. And I think the North Nashville Transit Center is a highlight of that process of working with the community instead of telling them you've chosen a project for them. I have a few photos to show you. So I see someone's already found the Linda Tran up there when she was talking about the new buckets in the IIJA and the competitive nature. You want to go to the next slide? Oh, this is one of the receptions was held at the new soccer pitch in Austin, and you can't see it here, but to the right, it was the groundbreaking of their new train station at the soccer pitch. And it was absolutely brilliant. Right, this photo, I wanted to show the new development. You can see that that's housing. Next slide. Oh, that's back to Mayor Adler at the other night times to speak. And right next to him, to his right, was the mayor of Phoenix. Okay, next slide. This was one of the buses that they used. They had an art competition to wrap the bus, so that was the winning art. Next slide. This, I don't think you can read it, but up on top, you know, the ads of the buses, it's telling them what their proposition, their referendum bought them. So it says more rail, more buses, more transportation options, right? And so you can see their Project Connect as a comprehensive plan for you, right? So I thought that was really interesting how they're really showcasing what their communities voted for when they voted themselves a higher property tax. Fun fact, they also did that in Miami on their, all of their transit vehicles. They had this big sticker like right on the outside of it that said you're half cent at work, right? So people are recognizing that, yes, they're paying more in taxes, but they're getting a service for that. Next slide. This is the groundbreaking for that station, and you can see the cranes for that. There's some more development going on just on the back side of that track, as well as at the track. And at this groundbreaking, there were live music, marching band, elected officials coming to talk. I mean, it was really a big deal. It was really great. I was glad to be there. There shouldn't be many more. Are there more pictures? Okay, that's it, yeah. And that's it for me, unless there are any questions.
Yeah, so good for you to bring it back and share with us, because it gives us this national perspective that we don't have, and to have you in that board member perspective versus staff is really great for us to sort of understand and learn from you what's happening out here.
There were some board members at that workshop, but there weren't a lot. I think that, you know, board members definitely play a role in supporting the agency through this, and the Austin board did support their work, because they worked 5 years in their community engagement before they announced a referendum. And the transit agency did that. Once it became a campaign for a proposition, the transit agency had to take a back seat because they could no longer carry that right, carry that luggage. So, but it's pretty incredible how Austin did that. Yeah.
Great lessons. Anyone have questions of Jessica?
I also appreciate you bringing that back, and I think it's real important that, we all think about getting the community on board. I don't believe that there are just, people don't ride the bus, I don't believe that narrative. I really don't. On a small scale, when we went out, to Nolensville Road and the woman who had been in one of the ads was wearing her dance costume, from Mexico. I don't know if they said this, but she was suddenly there standing next to the bus, in her costume. Well, I thought that was planned by WeGo. No, she had run, she had seen the bus and had run somewhere and had gone and put the outfit on, and she was so excited, and she's calling people. And I mean, I could see how if you partnered, let's partner with the TSU marching band, and they're amazing, right? I mean, let's partner with, again, there's so many, there's a juvenile mariachi band in town, that's an offshoot of one of the schools. I mean, I really think that folks want to engage, and I never would have thought that somebody would be so excited. She had a story similar to yours, Carlene. That she told all her family, and she had posted all over social media, which is better than us posting about how great the bus was, because she remembered first coming to Nashville, and her family was too poor to have a car. And she remembered her first bus ride, and I think there must be quite a few people. I remember mine. I was 12, went to DC, and my single uncle just really didn't realize you don't just put 12-year-old girls on buses and send them off. He got in trouble. But I fell in love with the bus ever since then. Some poor bus driver got stuck with me going to the zoo, and, I mean, nightmare, ransom a red chief. But, I think many people have those stories, and I would love to share some of them. We know Gail has a story, so that's so inspiring. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Anything more, Jessica?
No. I mean, of course, there's always more, Gail. But I can save that for another meeting.
Of course, there's more. The buses never stop rolling.
Well, I will say this. I think the community engagement and outreach piece is so important because we need to instill that trust in the communities. Not only that we're listening, right, but that we can build good projects and that we're going to stay in their communities. And we are the communities, right?
Right.
We're not outsiders. We live here, and we take the bus, and we're integrated into the communities in that way. So I think that those are pillars of I think where Nashville and I think advocacy community should be looking.
Absolutely. Any other business?
Don't forget your shovels.
Okay, I have mine. This is my second hard hat too from Music City Central. I have one, yes. Yes, don't you have one too? Me and you continuing to hang together. Can't imagine what that next 50 looks like. But any event, wishing everyone a happy, safe, and healthy Thanksgiving season. Thank you all for all that you do. And with that, we are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.